Hello again. This is Pastor Naomi Barcanic from Spirit of Joy Lutheran Church in Clarkdale, Arizona. I'm here again today to continue our devotional series on Who Killed Jesus. Today we'll be looking at the person Pilate, Pontius Pilate, who it seems could easily have used his power to prevent the trial of Jesus from turning so ugly. Why? Because as the Roman governor of Judea, he had the last word. He could have saved Jesus if he'd wanted to. And all indications are that for various reasons, that's what he would have liked to have done. But why didn't he? He was governor in Judea from the years 26 to 37. Now that's 11 years. And as governor, Pilate was responsible for collecting tributes and taxes, which were either used to meet local governmental needs or were forwarded to Rome with appropriate reports. To keep the peace, Pilate could call on auxiliary units of infantry and cavalry stationed in Judea, and if any major disorders would be taken care of, they would be by the superior, the legate of Syria, who had a much larger army. From all existing records, Pilate was known as a mean-spirited and hard ruler who scorned his British subjects. His Jewish subjects, as well as their religion. Although nothing is known of Pilate's career before he became governor of Judea, it's assumed he had some influential friends in Rome and that he had previously served in the Roman army. Of course, his last notoriety was earned by his presiding over the trial of Jesus, and in the end, walking away from it. Now, all four Gospels indicate that the false charge against Jesus was one of rebellion against the government, an offense the Roman governor was expected to punish. Remember, High Priest Caiaphas accused Jesus of blasphemy because Jesus claimed he was the Messiah, the Son of God. And to the religious people, that was blasphemy. But those Jewish religious people had no power to condemn anyone to death. That had to be the Romans. And it fell on Roman governor Pontius Pilate's back. Now the Gospels picture Pilate as firmly convinced of Jesus' innocence, yet he's driven against his better judgment to condemn Jesus to death. Why? Well, when the rubber met the road, Pilate caved in to the political powers of his world and his own selfish nature. Get these crazy religious people out of my hair. He didn't care a bit about Jesus or about any of the religious people that he was governing. What many scholars believe is that what finally pushed Pilate over the edge was the statement of Jesus' accusers. And this is in John chapter 19, verse 12. If you release this man, you are not Caesar's friend. And to Pilate, this implied that the Jewish religious leaders and the raging crowd were prepared to appeal to Rome to have Pilate investigated for not doing his duty to ensure the integrity of the state he ruled. Listen now as I read about the role of Pontius Pilate. It's found in Matthew 27, verses 11 to 30. Now Jesus stood before the governor Pontius Pilate, And Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus said, "You say so." But when he was accused by the chief priests and elders, he did not answer. Then Pilate said to him, "Do you not hear how many accusations they make against you?" But he gave him no answer, not even to a single charge, so that the governor was greatly amazed. Now at the festival, the governor was accustomed to release a prisoner for the crowd, anyone whom they wanted. At the time, they had a notorious prisoner called Jesus, Barabbas. So after they had gathered, Pilate said to them, "Whom do you want me to release for you? Jesus Barabbas, or Jesus, who is called the Messiah?" For he realized that it was out of jealousy that they had handed him over. While he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent word to him, "Have nothing to do with that innocent man, for today I have suffered a great deal because of a dream about him." Now the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowds to ask for Barabbas and to have Jesus killed. The governor again said to them, "Which of the two do you want me to release for you?" And they said, "Barabbas." Pilate said to them, "Then what should I do with Jesus, who is called the Messiah?" All of them said, "Let him be crucified." Then he asked, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Let him be crucified." So when Pilate saw that he could do nothing but rather that a riot was beginning, he took some water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, "I am innocent of this man's blood. See to it yourselves." Then the people as a whole answered, "His blood be on us and on our children." So he released Barabbas for them, and after flogging Jesus, he handed him over to be crucified. Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the governor's headquarters, and they gathered the whole cohort around him. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him, and after twisting some thorns into a crown, they put it on his head. They put a reed in his right hand, and knelt before him, mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" They spat on him and took the reed and struck him on the head. After mocking him, they stripped him of the robe and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him away to crucify him. Personally, I think that in the beginning, when the high priest Caiaphas and his court brought Jesus to Pilate, it was business as usual. Pilate maybe felt that Jesus had committed some religious irregularity in their eyes, but the religion of the Jews meant nothing to Pilate, so this Jesus trial would be nothing. I don't think Pilate even cared at all about Jesus. This was just another Jewish problem that he was forced to deal with. But as the trial moved on, when Herod returned Jesus to Pilate with no accusations, and the religious leaders and the people were breathing down his neck, Pilate found himself in a bit of a mess. Why, even his wife had told him about a dream she had about this Jesus and not to get involved. So when the Barabbas deal backfired, and Pilate had to deliver Jesus to the angry mob, Pilate had to save face politically, and maybe even his life literally. If indeed the religious leaders would turn him into his superior in Rome for not doing his job. So here comes yet another political ploy of Pilate. No one can say he wasn't clever. First, he turned Jesus over to Herod, thinking he'd be done with him. Then, when he came back, he gave to the crowd the choice of either Jesus or Barabbas' release. And when that backfired, Finally, to make it perfectly clear to everyone standing around, Jews and Romans alike, he said, "I am innocent of this man's blood." And in a dramatic gesture, probably just a political show, Pilate steps out in front of the crowd and went through a ritual hand washing in a basin of water he had his servants fill. I think, in his own selfish way of thinking, he was just trying once again to pass the buck. The Jewish people and their religious leaders had outsmarted him and scared him. So with this dramatic gesture of hand washing, he was going to show everyone that the crucifixion of Jesus will take place against his advice and better judgment. It just got too hot in the kitchen for Pilate, and he needed to get out in order to save his own job and maybe his own neck. Remember the other famous hand washer we've all read about in Shakespeare, Lady Macbeth? She had committed murder herself, and what she kept trying to wash away in her sleep, long after her hands were clean as a whistle, was her tormenting sense of guilt over the terrible thing she had done. But Pilate's case is different. For him, it was not so much the terrible things he'd done as the wonderful thing he had proved incapable of doing. Letting an innocent man go free. He, out of his own free will, allowed himself to be driven primarily by a political expedience. He was no less guilty than the high priest Caiaphas or Herod Antipas. Pilate is guilty not only for what he allowed Jesus to go through, the flogging and the mocking, but he's also guilty for what he could have done and did not do. He caved in and tried to get out of the whole mess by simply washing his hands. Pastor Frederick Buechner, in his wonderful book, Peculiar Treasures, states this about Pontius Pilate. There is a sad old legend that again and again Pilate's body rises to the surface of a mountain lake and goes through the motion of washing his hands as he tries to cleanse himself not of something he'd done, for which God could forgive him, but of something he might have done but did not do, for which he could never forgive himself. It's easy to walk away like Pilate and make all kinds of correct gestures than it is to stand up for justice and for mercy and for truth. So if we point our fingers at Pilate, just remember, 3 of our own fingers are pointing back at us. Now remember, because of Jesus, God forgives us. We need not torment ourselves. For in Christ, each of us is a new creation. But that doesn't mean we might have affected a person's life, a person's reputation, or a family's life, or a business, or even a nation. Because of something we did not do. Because we washed our hands because it was the safest and easiest thing to do. My prayer for all of us is that we look to Jesus Christ himself for the courage to stand tall and firm for justice and truth, both in the big issues of life and in the smallest of situations. After all, that's what growing in our faith is all about. We have no power to undo the past, but we all can grow to be giants in our faith and in our actions as we journey forward in this Lenten season and afterwards into the beauty of the resurrection. Next time, we'll talk just a little bit about that criminal Barabbas, who was freed. Don't you wonder how he must have felt? See you next time. Goodbye.